All right, let's talk about Christopher Columbus. We all know the story, or at least the story we learned in school. The master navigator who knew exactly where he was going. But, was that journey really a stroke of pure genius, or was it something else? Let's dig in.
So this is really the core question, isn't it? Did Columbus have this crystal clear picture in his head, this detailed map that he was expertly following? Or was he, kind of just sailing out into the unknown, guided by a really bold but really flawed idea?
And this is the myth you hear all the time. The claim goes that Columbus wasn't just some lucky guy. No, he was this brilliant navigator who had unlocked some secret, advanced knowledge of the Atlantic's ocean currents, using them like a highway to get to the New World.
Okay, so we've looked at the history, we've looked at the records. What's the verdict on this whole expert navigator claim? Well, to put it simply, it's misleading. Let's get into why.
Yeah, misleading is probably the best word for it. Look, Columbus was a capable sailor, for sure, but this idea that he had a 21st century understanding of oceanography, it just doesn't add up. And honestly, the real story is way more fascinating.
So, if it wasn't some secret knowledge of the ocean's currents, what was the real key to his voyage? Well, the answer wasn't in the water at all. It was in the air.
See, this myth about using ocean currents, it makes it sound like he had GPS coordinates for a specific island. But the reality? It was all about the trade winds. These were powerful, super predictable winds that sailors at the time already knew blew constantly to the west. So his genius wasn't in navigating to a place, it was in finding a natural engine that would just push him across the ocean.
And that leads to the next huge point. If he didn't know the Americas were there, where in the world did he think he was actually going?
Right. This is the big one. Columbus went to his grave believing he had found the outer edges of Asia, what he called the Indies. He had totally, completely underestimated how big the planet was. He had absolutely no idea that two entire continents and a whole other ocean were in his way.
I mean, his plan was, on the surface, pretty simple. You could even call it a three-step plan. Step 1, the Earth is round. Okay, educated people knew that. Step 2, so if you sail west from Europe, Step 3, you have to eventually hit Asia. Right? It was a perfectly logical plan that just happened to be missing an entire hemisphere of the planet.
But wait a minute, what about getting back home? If all the strong winds blew west, how did anyone ever sail back east to Europe? Well, this is where the real learning began, and Columbus just kicked things off.
You see, this expert knowledge of the Atlantic didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was like a huge group project that took decades. After Columbus's first trip in '92, tons of other sailors started making the journey, and each one added a little piece to the puzzle. They slowly, collectively figured it out. Mastering the return trip, like learning how to ride the powerful Gulf Stream current back home, that came much, much later.
So let's just recap the big takeaways here. First, Columbus used the winds, not the currents, to get across the Atlantic. Second, his target was Asia, and he had no clue where he'd actually end up. And third, all that really sophisticated knowledge about using ocean currents to get back, that was figured out by the generations of sailors who came after him. And this really points to a bigger idea. We love the story of the lone genius who changes the world in a flash. But history, it's usually a lot messier. It's a slow, collaborative process. Knowledge gets built over time, piece by piece, by a whole lot of people.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we peel back this one myth, we find a story that's so much more complex and, frankly, more human. So it leaves you with a question. What other historical facts that we all just accept are actually just carefully constructed myths waiting to be explored?